Greetings, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Saqib. I'm your host on the Hikmah Project podcast. And today we'll be speaking to Dr. Wadude, who has been on the path for many, many years with his guide, Sidi Muhammad Jamal. And he's a medical doctor, as well as somebody who's steeped in the Sufi tradition of healing, which he learned from his guide. So he'll be talking to us about that. And he'll also be talking to us about the stations and sharing various stories, teaching stories that he's experienced along the way. So incidentally, he is also running a retreat in the UK early May. I'll put details in the notes of this podcast and on the website, and that's near Leicester. So you may want to sign up to that if you want to know more and meet him in person. But we had a spectacular, fascinating discussion in which he spoke about how he arrived to the path and how his guide really worked with him on all sorts of levels and cleared things, and it's just fascinating to see. And if you meet him in person, alhamdulillah, he just carries a deep level of humility and presence. And you can tell his soul has gone through an alchemical transformation. So, alhamdulillah, I met him last year, in fact, and that's one of the fond memories I have of being with him and doing some work with him. So, just a few other announcements. We are planning to run some more circles. So, if you go onto the website, thehikmahproject.com, there are circles being advertised there, and we're looking to do something around Ibn Arabi. There's the circle currently being run on The Secrets of Divine Love, the book by Helwan. We're doing a reading and journaling circle, and that's still open. So we are on the chapter on the Quran, and so we're gradually sort of working through that, but you're more than welcome to join that circle at any point. So details on the website. Any questions, please do email us on thehikmahproject@gmail.com. And as always, your support is always valued. So please do consider supporting this project through becoming a member. And I think something like £5 a month, but that really does help to carry the project forward and to support us in developing this further. So without further ado, here's the podcast. Welcome, Sidi Wadude. Lovely to have you with us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for your invitation.
So today we're going to be talking about the teachings of Sidi Muhammad Said al-Jamal, who's your teacher. Before we do that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and how you came to be here?
Okay. Let's see. I went to medical school, become a family practice doctor, and during my residency training, I took a workshop. It was a humanistic psychology workshop, and the leader of the workshop said, "Let's go out and take a break." And it was like the first day of spring. We were in the North Carolina mountains, and she said, "Let's whirl." And I said, "What's whirling?" And she said, "Oh, that's what you did as a kid. You just go outside and you put your arms out wide and you turn around and around." And I said, "Look, lady, when I was a kid, I didn't whirl. I played football, baseball, and ice hockey." She said, "Try it." I said, "Okay." I was immediately in the music of the spheres. That's all I can describe it. It was like abstract music. It was stunning. And after their 15-minute break outside, the rest of the workshop went back inside, and I kept whirling for a whole nother hour. I never had any experience like that in my life, and I was in an ecstasy. And then I knew, it's like, oh, when Rumi said we came home drunk from the tavern, I knew exactly what he was talking about. I'd really tasted it. So that person who led the workshop was actually a Sufi. I'd never heard of Sufis. I didn't know Sufis. But that led me to her teacher, which is a man named John Johnson, or Himayat Inayati, who was in Pir Vilayat Khan's order. And so I took 1 year of my residence training in medicine. I wasn't interested in learning what they were teaching. I was looking for something much more transformative. So once I had enough training to get my medical license, I left the residency program and then helped start a Sufi community called Light of the Mountains, which is outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And my wife moved there. We built our own house. We built out a hospital birthing center. I started an integrative medical practice. We birthed our children at home. And that was a very intense time. That was back in the late 70s and early 80s. So after about 7 or 8 years if anyone who's lived in a spiritual community, it's really intense, and ours was very intense. So we moved out of this rural community. Our daughters were old enough that we had to drive them to soccer, or I guess what you guys call football, and all the different things that young girls want to do after school. So it was about 1995, I started studying with an energetic healer. I guess you could say spiritual healer, but a sort of energetic healing, and that opened my vision in terms of healing, which I didn't get in medical school. And so I started learning about, clairvoyance, reading auras, helping people with their chakras and their issues, and so on and so forth. And then in the early, maybe about 1998, I would guess, I had the opportunity to meet Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal, who lived in the Holy Land and was coming to the United States sometime before that, actually, but was coming to the United States. He had two of his sons lived out in Marin County in San Francisco. And so I felt called on the inner to go meet him. And so as I got on a plane, I think I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the time, and I knew what it was like to take the hand of a teacher. That's like a big deal. You're really committing to surrender. And I really look at it very classically, which is it's the role of the student to surrender completely and to be one with their guide. So I was in the plane. I said, gosh, should I take the different ways people say it, take the promise or take hand? Should I take hand with a shake? Should I not take hand? Should I take hand? Should I not take hand? That was just going around in my spirit. I land in San Francisco airport. I rent a car. I drive it out to Marin County. I come to the front door. I knock on the door. The door opens, and I'm told to open the door, so I open the door. And there's this man just sitting on a mattress in an empty room. And the first thing he says to me, he looks up at me and says, "Take the promise." Like, take hand, now is the time. So I did that, of course, and gave me the name Wadude. And I knew Wadude was the quality of God, which is love. But I asked him, I said, Sidi, what is the meaning of that name for me? And he said, Wadude. Wadude is the one who brings the deep love of God to the people. And it just immediately felt like a piece of soul guidance. I mean, it was even higher than that. It's not about you anymore. It's about bringing the light of God to the people. Interesting thing was the first name I received from a completely different tariqa, this first tariqa I talked about, was Qalbi, which is Qalb, an Arabic word for heart. So Qalbi was translated to me as the heart of someone who's been in love with God, his whole existence. So it was just interesting. I got two names that were really about the heart and about love, and definitely felt like with this teacher who saw very deeply, my purpose, my role, how to serve. I'm just incredibly grateful. Interestingly enough, right after taking a hand or giving the promise to my guide, there was a new Sufi community being built, in this case by his students, by his beloveds, and that was in Napa County. one county over from where he lived. And that center was really a major focus of our efforts. And he would come often to give teachings there. People would come from all over the country. And then after a while, he started going around to, basically there were communities or local communities, groups of beloveds in some of the major areas in the country. There's like 8 or 9 places in the country where every summer he would go and spend a weekend or a longer time in each of these places. So I was, blessed to be able to travel with him and to support him in the teachings and to learn.
So, Siddhi, what was his message? How would you summarize his teachings?
What was his message? Well, a little bit about his background. He, like I think most true teachers, didn't talk much about his background. It wasn't about him. It's about the message that he was given to deliver. But it's very clear, he had memorized the Quran at a very early age. I remember the story he told where it's either his father or his grandfather said it was, time for him to write out the Quran, to write it out by memory. And so he did it. And his father, grandfather looked at it and said, well, there's 3 mistakes in here. You need to correct it. So we went and wrote it again. And there was 1 mistake in it. Said there's 1 mistake in it. You need to correct it. So of course, this isn't copying a Quran. This is like from memory, writing it exactly. So that was, he got the classical training at home. He took all of the Islamic sciences. By 17, I think he was acknowledged as someone who had reached a significant level of completion, like way in terms of the outer exoteric and inner esoteric sciences. So he was clearly destined for playing a significant role. On the outer, I believe he had mastery of at least 4 of the major schools of jurisprudence. And King Hussein, the father of the current king, King Hussein, I believe, made Sidi Muhammad the head judge of all of the judges in the Holy Land.
Wow.
So Sidi Muhammad was the lead jurist, I guess we'd say. And so he was old school. I remember he heard reports of judges would make people wait in line for them. They'd be impolite. And I think within the first very short, early part of his term, he just reassigned every single one of them to a completely new jurisdiction and said, now let's do it right. Be servants of the people, be just. And he was tough. He was given the job. One of his projects, I remember, was when the Dome of the Rock had a new gold, I don't know what you call it, gold
Dome,
new gold put on it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And I think when 1 dinar was missing in the project, he caused, as we'd say in English, holy hell to come down to make sure that everything was done exactly right. So he was also was involved in creating one of the universities in Jerusalem. So, and he was as you and I talked a little bit, he was an activist, very much an activist. He was red-haired, I think, as a younger man. He was a real lion. He roared. And I think he said he'd been arrested and put in jail by 7 different governments in the Middle East. So wherever he saw injustice, it didn't matter. He was a very, very strong stand for justice. So his calling card, if you will, he would always say that Allah's message is the message of peace, love, mercy, justice, freedom, and beauty. And it's our blessing to be able to carry that message to whatever degree we can. So justice was important. There's a story well known in the Middle East. There was a demonstration, and an Israeli sharpshooter came and fired whatever number of bullets, and didn't hit the sheikh. And the sharpshooter came up to him, Israeli soldier, and said, "I know you're a holy man because at whatever it was, 100 yards, 500 yards, 100 meters, 500 meters, said, I never miss. And you have to be a holy man because my bullets didn't hit you." And Sidi reached into his pocket and pulled out the bullets. He said, "You mean these? Here, I should give these back to you." So widely known and reported in the Middle East. What else? He would be old, like I said, old school. When he'd go to different villages, he'd go with a donkey. He'd load up a donkey, and there was a time he got the calling to bring food to some villagers, and this is obviously before the last 20 years. It was a long time ago, but still, Israelis use real bullets. And the same thing, he comes to the checkpoint, and he just walks right through the checkpoint with a donkey full of foodstuffs. And stop, you have to stop, old man. And he just keep walking, and they would say, "We're going to shoot," and their guns all caught. I don't know what the word is, they caught and didn't fire off. And he just goes, delivers the food, and a couple hours later comes back through the checkpoint and says, "Salam alaikum, brothers."
Yeah.
So he wouldn't talk about these, but having studied with him, or late night conversations, he's a great storyteller. Sometimes you hear these things and piece it together. And I do want to say, it's not all rosy. It's not always sort of these magical outcomes. He spent many years to get a school, a nursery, a community center started someplace in Jerusalem. As people know, it takes many, many years just to get permits, and a lot of opposition. He was a lawyer. I mean, he knew how to work the system, but it took many, many, many years. So finally they have a structure built, and one day he lived on the Mount of Olives, and I don't know how far away this was from Mount of Olives, but people came running up to him and said, "Sidi, the people were really, really upset." And the Israelis had 3 military bulldozers, the big bulldozers they used to knock down structures. So people came, and it was almost like a riot. Obviously, people were really upset at the threat of this building being bulldozed down. So I remember Sidi told me the story. So he said, "Allah!" And one of the bulldozer drivers just kind of went unconscious and slumped over the wheel. Second, a bulldozer driver got up and went to his commanding officer and said, "I just can't do this anymore," and just went AWOL, just left. I said, "See, what happened to the third, driver?" He said, "He bulldozed down the whole thing. Probably took 2 minutes. These big machines they have." I was talking to Sidi on the phone. And I said, kind of a natural human question. I said, "Well, Sidi, how did that make you feel?" Which is kind of not the kind of question you usually ask a guide or a sheikh. Was, "How did it make you feel?" And I'm in the United States. He's in Jerusalem. And he said, "Oh, it made me very happy." And I said, here's my naps coming. It's like, "No, Sidi, really, how did you really feel?" It was kind of like subtext. "Sidi, I'm one of your senior students. You can tell me if you have feelings about it." It's not for a lot. So, "How did you really feel?" He said, "Oh, Wadude, makes me very happy." And then I knew I was in way over my head. I had no idea what was going on here. So I humbled down a little bit, and I said, "Well, see, tell me why does that make you happy?" He said, "Well, Wadude, and he didn't have the word in English at that time, but what he was saying is the rubble, over the
Yeah.
trash building." He said, "Over the rubble, there were many, many angels." I still didn't get it. So I said, "Yes, and it makes me very happy." He said, "That means this school is Allah's school, and if it's Allah's school, Allah will build this school." And sure enough, a few years later, they got it built. So he was engaged with governments. He was engaged with, the supporting his community. I remember one of the popes came to Jerusalem. It was like a major visit, and not the current pope, and a couple of popes ago, I think. And like I said, Sidi could be very strong, and he was very strong with the pope. He said, "How can you claim to be a follower of Jesus? You're what's the center, the Catholic center in Rome, Vatican. Your Vatican has billions of dollars worth of treasure, while there are people all over the world that need food, that need medicine. How can you call yourself a follower of Jesus?" And the Pope's security detail move in to kind of move this old man out of the Pope's way. And the Pope said, "No, this is the first man who's spoken to me honestly in my whole trip." So, this was, we didn't see a lot of this in the United States, because his United States time was basically spent teaching the teachings. And I think he had to be careful about what he could say, because he was on some kind of visa or something like that. So he couldn't be politically active in the United States. But he sure has an amazing track record. When you're working with a mystic, you never know what's going on. I remember early on, he was asked to give a presentation at a Muslim conference in San Francisco, or some kind of conference. And at the last minute, for reasons I don't know, because this was like my first couple of weeks with him, he wasn't allowed to give the talk. So he said, "Let's go outside. We'll go outside in front of the hotel." He had this big, long banner. I don't know if it was a banner for the Palestinians, or I don't know what it was. And the hotel entryway was like a half a story above the sidewalk in the street area of San Francisco. So there's probably about 20 or 30 of us holding up this banner. And Sidi is just speaking at the top of his lungs, giving his message to who knows who. And it was San Francisco, so periodic, it's a demonstration. So people would drive by, honk their horns, and give the V for victory sign. And it wasn't until later I realized that he was talking to everyone in the world who has a heart and ears that could listen. And he was not only talking in 1999 or whenever it was, he was talking, and it's very clear to me that his work, his books, the ones he's published originally, the ones he's republished from some of the classics, my sense is what do I know, but I'm just saying subjectively, my sense is he was laying down information, laying down light for the next 200 or 300 years. I think that's the universe in which he was playing. And stuff for a lot, that might be complete illusion, or maybe he was laying down stuff for 500 years. I don't know. But I got that sense, there's a lot more coming through him than obviously meets the eye. And that's true for all the sheikhs in our way, and all the different tariqas, real sheikhs.
Sidi, could you tell us a bit about the Shadli way and the role of love in the Shadli way, or what makes the Shadli way distinct from other Sufi paths?
Well, it's a beautiful question that I'm not qualified to answer in the following sense. The only shadowy teachings I really know are the ones that were, Allah gave to me through my guide. And there's many, many different shadowy because, all over the world. So I really can't compare it with anything. I can, if you'd like, I can kind of give you a sense of how that teaching came through this particular guide, Sidi Muhammad.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were going to ask about love, but I did. My name is Wadude. I did pull out a short essay he wrote on love. It's one of the first things you read as a student. So that I think that might be of interest to our listeners. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And he writes, when you find the love, you find yourself. The secret is in the love. You are the love, not another. Everything is in the love, and everyone needs the love. If you find this, what more could you want? And when you know this, what more could you want? When you have the knowledge of the love, you feel peace in your heart. The jewels are inside you. And this is the holy meaning. And when you understand, then you are the meaning, the holy meaning. But look and reach so that you find every meaning and do not hesitate because inside every meaning is the quality of the love. The love has 7 qualities, and this love knows no differences. If the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, and the people of any other religion knew their religion well, there would only be one religion, the religion of love, peace, and mercy. Should I continue?
Please.
This is good stuff. That line, by the way, if the Muslims, Jews, Christians, and people of any other religion knew their religion well, there'd only be one religion, the religion of love, peace, and mercy. I can't tell you how deeply that has impacted so many people, just that one simple utterance. It's been very profoundly, really opened the door for people to look into Islam and Sufism, actually to many people. And his message was always about unity, but really unity through, I think ultimately unity through Islam, but very deep message. And he carried, I mean, what made it work is he carries the love. Continuing, leave everything outside that is not useful and give everything to God to live inside his garden of love. Remember the name of God at every waking moment, and you will find him beside you to help you to walk in the way. Be courteous with everyone you meet. Give them mercy to help them to know the meaning of this love. Give and listen to everyone who speaks to you. Listen with the ear of your heart, because this is the voice of God speaking to you, trying to help you to know him. If you hear another voice, it is wrong. Open your heart to God, and God will give you everything. And then your heart will feel quiet, and you will only see the love, only the love. You are the reflection of God. There is nothing, only Allah. Where is another? Give everything to God, and you will begin to know yourself. When God made you, he made beauty. Live with the people on the outside, but hear only your God. Those who live in the outside world are like jewels that need cleaning. They need the fire to burn away all the imperfections so the jewel may reflect its inner beauty. If you are not clean on the inside, how can you find the love? The Sufi way is the straight way. Walking a straight path to God, letting nothing on either side block the vision of the straight way. I will ask God to send mercy and peace to everyone, because he is the peace. If you want God, remember that he gives you what you want. Don't be afraid. God will not give to you anything that is not good. We must see God in the face of every human being. When you walk And when you sleep, remember the name of God. When you pray to God, pray only to love him. Do not pray for him to put you in the garden. God throws out a net, and when he catches you in this net, then you are in the garden. Every student needs God. When he helps you to find him, then pray. And when you look into another person's eyes, see the reflection of God looking at you. Understand that inside every word is a message or a sign from God. See the image of God in every person that you meet. All the troubles in the world are necessary. If there was no darkness, how could there be light? If you did not see sadness, how could you see happiness? Be courteous to everyone and see the face of God in every person. But know that the people on the outside carry two faces. On the inside, they carry the face of God, but on the outside, the face of Shaitan. Be polite with both faces. And when you see someone angry or shouting, know who speaks with you. Who is with a capital W. Know who speaks with you. Everyone has put himself in his place, and this is the station for that person. Be polite with him and give him mercy. Be with God all the time and do not speak with anyone from the outside unless it's necessary. Give your time for God, and God will change you from station to station, cleaning your heart of everything that is not good. This is the message of the prophets. It is a difficult way and at the same time a very easy way. When anyone wants to know God, he will help anyone to walk in the straight way. In the last paragraph, follow one guide to take you by the hand to guide you from the darkness to the light. The guide will make the walking easy for you, and then you can rest. If you go from here to there and here to there, you lose your time. The student of the family of God rests because the student lives in the garden. When anyone knows why he lives and walks in this created world, then he begins to know himself. We are here only to know Allah. Live all the time in the garden of love. When your heart feels the love, then everything around you is quiet and at peace. This is from the message, but not all the message. Live to love and live to know God.
Amazing. Sidi, could you say something about his relationship to Ibn Arabi? I have come to learn how he was quite steeped or well versed with Ibn Arabi's works.
Again, a question I can't answer. It's above my pay grade, but I can share a couple of things. I once asked him kind of the question, Sidi, I understand that you had a deep connection with Ibn Arabi. Is that true? He goes, oh, Wadude. Then he tells me there were times where he was major. I'm not sure what his actual title or role was, but it might have been in Damascus, in one of the major mosques there, where he would give. And I wonder where, I think it was Damascus. Anyway, so he said, yes, I just would open my heart and open my mouth, and it was just, I mean, I think is basically saying he was just channeling Ibn Arabi week after week after week after week. He was a young man, and finally his guide said, enough of this, Sidi Muhammad. So I took that to mean he probably had a pretty deep connection on the inner. More helpful for the people here is that he wrote a book called The Realities of Imagination. I'll tell people where they can get these books. The Reality of Imagination, I have been told, I haven't studied Ibn Arabi, so that's why I say I really can't answer your question, but I've been told by people who have, this book carries a lot of Ibn Arabi's message, in different languaging, and Sidi, when he writes, he goes right to the essence of things. So that's why I'm thinking of it. The person who had published most of his books, Amina Al-Jamal, their website is sufimaster.org. So a book, Realities of Imagination, I highly recommend. A book I just read from is called The Music of the Soul. And you were asking earlier before our I think it was before we got on the recording, how did he teach his students? Well, The Music of the Soul was the first book that he had. It was published before the year 2000, and contains many of the earliest teachings that he gave Westerners. There were a group of Westerners who were, searching for a spiritual leader, a spiritual guide, and CD ended up vacuuming them up over several years. Sheikh Nuruddin Durkee, as you know, was one of them, and many other beautiful people, many of them who live in England now, would receive teachings from him, and these were transcribed into the book Music of the Soul. Relevant for your people who are listening is the Music of the Soul is a very clear guide on the inner planes, if you will, for this cleaning of the heart, cleaning of the personality, presented in a very unique form. So classical Sufism describes the journey from a life guided by the darkness to a life one with Allah as 7 stations. Those are the classical 7. In the Music of the Soul, there's right in the first section, there's 28 stations. And our best understanding is these 28 stations are really an expansion of those classical first 4 stations. So for someone who wants to, get the inner and outer transmission, that's what CD would have people do, is what we call write the stations, which is the classical old copy it literally, exactly in a notebook, and be in remembrance while you're doing that, sit in remembrance around certain, passages or paragraphs. And it was a way that he may have had 1 million students. I don't know. He had many thousands, tens and tens of thousands of students. And this was a way that it's kind of a vehicle on the outer so that people could drink from him on the inner and drink really from Allah. So that's how I started. That's how everybody starts. And I remember I asked them, I said, CD, we call that writing the stations. I said, CD, when, I'm supporting people writing the stations, the people really want to know deeply what's here, what are the teachings, and should I have them, pray that, pray to your spirit, pray that your spirit will come to them, and teach them on the inner. And he said, "Oh no, Wadude," and I didn't know the mistake that I had just made. He said, "No, they should pray to Allah. And if Allah wants to send my spirit, alhamdulillah." So he was very careful not to be between the student and Allah. But when you have, someone who's given you love and is full of the wisdom, and, it's just natural. It was natural for me. And I think students, probably in any spiritual tradition, to, the guide, the spiritual teacher, is a veil. And even Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is described as the last and greatest veil. So he was very careful. I remember when, of course, people feel gratitude when they receive, truthful teachings or loving counsel. And you just say, "CD, thank you." And he would say very brusquely, "Thank Allah." Every single time. And then, being a smart aleck, there's once I said, I was just full of gratitude to him. I said, "Okay, I know what's going to happen if I say, 'Thank you, CD.'" So I said, "CD, I've already thanked Allah for everything that Allah gave through you, and now I want to thank you." He sort of grimaced on that one. I realized I'd overplayed my hand, but he didn't, he would say constantly, he taught by example, taught through his books, taught through, before he'd come to the United States, I know every year, I know my wife would feel like her naps was being crushed about 2 or 3 weeks before he even set foot on the soil. So he kind of knew his God. I had a milder experience of it, but so, he taught by his presence, taught through his prayers. I remember he came to me once, maybe people know about hijama or cupping, the Islamic practice of cupping, where incisions, in this case, what he taught, incisions are made and blood is sucked out as part of the treatment. And he came to me early on and he said, Wadude, I told my grandfather, that I would only teach the hijama, the cupping, to someone who I deeply and completely trust, and I want to teach that to you. So it was an incredible gift. And I don't think he taught it right at that moment, but he was basically saying what he was going to do. And so I stepped away, and for the rest of the day, my dark medical mind went crazy. It's like, cupping, that's bloodletting, that's like barbaric, that's medieval. And I realized that the shaitan was just exploding inside me. And I'd been walking enough with CD that it wasn't about defending any opinion I had. It was just asking for help to clear help clear things when I'm in trouble. And so I went to him and I said, CD, and again, his English wasn't as good as it eventually was. So I just said, and I'm sure he could see it, energetically. I said, CD, my dark mind is I'm just having trouble with my dark mind about this cupping thing. He said, oh, Wadude, don't worry, I'll pray for you. And like I said, it was early on. I thought, well, that's kind of a throwaway line. It's not I had no idea who this man was. So he's going to pray for me. And I have no idea what he did. And a lot of the times he'd shift things that were just in me. They were very clear that things shifted. I had no idea what it was. Anyway, I wake up in the morning and it's like I have a completely new creation around this. It's like I would go up to you if you were there, Sufism, and I'd say, brother, would you like to have a cupping session? I learned cupping. This is the most amazing thing. Let me tell you about it. So in his prayers, he just turned my medical mind to mush, or I guess you'd say porridge, over in the UK. So yeah, I forgot how we got into that, but that was one of the ways he taught, through his prayers. And
Sidi, just for our listeners, particularly listeners who are seeking a guide and may have never encountered a awliya, a wali, a saint, and could you say something about what it was like being in his presence? And what, I'm just thinking, in that time in the United States, I'm sure you had lots of spiritual movements going on through experimental sort of drug taking and, the 60s movement to Zen Buddhism and New Age spirituality and yogic sort of path. So I'm sure you probably had exposure to many forms of spirituality. How did you know he was more than just a learned, pious person? What was it like being in his presence? And I dare say compare it to others, but there must have been something that made you surrender and for you to say, actually, I don't need to go anywhere else. This is my path. I'm completely content here, and I've got everything that my soul is yearning for.
Just in my own life, I was clearly brought to Sufism, like the story I told you. I went to a workshop and all of a sudden I'm swirling and I'm in the music of the spheres, and then turns out there's a Sufi teacher behind it. So I think that the first thing for me is that I was willing to follow, I was blessed with a willingness to follow, the breadcrumbs where they left from one step to another step to another step. I think when I went and took hand with a guide, and when he said, Wadude is the one who brings the deep love of God to the people, I think I started weeping. It was so deep and so profound. So anyone who interacted with him, if their heart was sincere, their heart would be touched. They would be inspired. They'd be inspired to study, to walk, to clean, to contribute, to support. He was full. So I think my wife was a little bit different. First time she saw him, she said she'd never been with a person who emanated God so completely, thoroughly. Other people saw him in a dream, years before. And then when they saw him in the dunya, it's like, oh, this is my guide. So I think, for any of these awliyas, meaning the friends or beloveds of Allah, Allah brings students to them through destiny, I think, and often through the insights and the magnetism and the lights that Allah gives these people. It's kind of like a tractor beam. I mentioned sincerity. I remember Sidi would often say, he'd say, Wadude, the deep sincere is the most important quality. So what's sincerity? Sincerity is a sincere desire to know God. It's the willingness to surrender anything that's not in the truth, that's not in the highest. And I think what's hardest for people to surrender is their identities. So, so I think it's important to recognize, and maybe you guys have talked about this in your previous podcasts. Sidi republished a book called He Who Knows Himself Knows His Lord. And I don't know if that was the classical title. And I think it's a classic. I think it was published maybe 150 years ago. And it's kind of a companion to the Music of the Soul. The Music of the Soul book is sort of a lyrical, what would you say? It's a lyrical, it opens up the inner. And Sidi would give, I think one of the reasons why he was so attractive to us is he would open up the inner mystical realms, and meaning through experience, through direct tasting, and reveal, he felt he had the order to reveal, the secrets of the way. And I remember we had someone from another tariqa, I don't know, it was Naqshbandi or I don't know which tariqa was, but it's a completely another tariqa with wonderful, wonderful teachers, authentic teachers. And she was at our 1 week healing intensive at our mother center, Sufi center out in California. And we were just reading her stuff from the Music of the Soul, which is, Music of the Soul is like, it's an intro book that has everything. So there's some chapters there I've read literally 50 times and still more gets revealed. I don't know how he just sort of wrote in a way that was layered light upon light. And anyway, we part of our healing retreat, we'd read passages maybe like the one I just read around the love. And I remember she was absolutely stunned that, she had been in the Sufi work for 15 years. She was actually stunned by what this guide, Sidi Muhammad, was revealing, things that had never been revealed to her at all in her way. And I don't know why, but we've had several people from other tariqas, even others, maybe shadowy groups, where honestly, I don't think we realized how unique it was, what was being revealed to us. It was just a constant stream over 20 years. Part of it was toward the end of his life, he was frantic's not the word, urgent's not the word, but somewhere in there, wanting to pour as much teaching and as much light into people as possible. He was very clear that very difficult and strong times were coming. Absolutely clear about that. And he wanted people to be able to be in these strong times without losing their witnessing of Allah and their alignment with Allah and their guidance that they receive from Allah. So I have no doubt that, this sort of poly-crisis world that we live in is, maybe just the beginning, who knows? But he was trying to prepare people to help provide people who could help during strong times. So he was, a lot of the New Age movements you mentioned, and I was involved in several of them, very attractive, and they can sort of open the heart and open the spirit. CD was very old school, though. When he was in the United States, apparently he was sort of much more, I don't know what the word would be, but he said, 15 years ago when I was teaching, if somebody didn't open their heart to Allah within 3 minutes, it's like I was done with them. So he was, on the outside, he looks kind of gruff. If you're only looking, he looks austere, might be a better word. He looks austere most of the time. But by the time he was in the United States, we have the Americans, we have so many naffs, and in some ways we're so informal, and in some ways so clueless, and we don't have the traditional foundations of Islam. I'm sure he had to be very, very tolerant of our culture and our naffs, and so he was very patient, very patient. He did teach healing. So that goes to another piece, is a lot of us had been energetic healers, so-called spiritual healers before he came. And so I think that was a hook. He was a master healer. His grandfather was a master herbalist, so he was a master herbalist. So, and he had this deep, deep tradition in Islam. So he would teach us healing, a lot of which was just piece after piece of, Quranic ayats and du'as and stuff like that. Like I said, we came from a kind of a strong clairvoyant background, which isn't necessarily an Islamic trait, but some of our teachers would, you could talk to CD and say, I see this on the inside, and this is what's going on the outside, and get some of those avenues of perception cleaned. But it was different than the New Age. And how could I explain it? So there's one of our senior teachers right from the beginning is a woman named Selima Edelstein, and she founded and is kind of a co-director now at the Farm of Peace, which is in Warfordsburg, Pennsylvania, established center there. Anyway, she was a very accomplished clairvoyant, fully clairvoyant, spiritual healer, very accomplished, and CD called her over to Jerusalem in the early days, and where she spent a month in his zawiya, we were talking a little bit about before. And so she would be writing the stations and doing whatever practices he had suggested of her. And CD's wife had as I understand it, I never met her, but she had a kind of a congenital lung ailment. So she had pulmonary problems her whole life. So CD said to Selima, he said, my daughter, go into the next room where my wife is, and please give her a healing. So when word got out that the sheikh had sent this American healer in to heal his wife, and what I picture is kind of a small room, and just dozens and dozens of people crowding in around, the wife's on the bed, and Selima's, standing there, maybe sitting at the foot of the bed, and everybody's around, the pressure's on, what's this healer going to be able to do? And she goes to her, her go-to clairvoyance to try to get a sense of what's really going on. And she, like I said, she's very energetically sensitive. And she became aware that CD was in the next room watching CNN International News. And while he was watching the news, she was very aware that his spirit came and completely closed down her clairvoyance. And so she was blind, you could say. And I can only imagine that even if you only have a little naps, that must have been very stressful. So what happened was, she just, she's like, okay, what is Allah making? What is my guide making? And how I understand it happening is the only thing that would make sense is that in terms of how it came out in the end is CD's spirit guided her to see through the eye of the heart rather than to see through the eye of the third eye.
Mm.
And this is seen through the eye of the heart that is in deep and complete surrender to Allah. And then Allah puts the knowledge and the wisdom in your heart. And that started a whole new way of healing for us. And it's just opening the eye of the heart. And then, of course, opening the healing is really a fantastic training system for walking to Allah. Because when I wasn't gifted in the beginning with those kind of clairvoyant impressions, and so it took me a while to realize I was given the information in different ways through my heart. But healings were kind of scary for me. Somebody sits down in front of you and it's not psychology. I can do psychology and inner child work and subpersonality work and all of that stuff. But this is a much deeper way. And so, and we've had a chance to teach hundreds, probably thousands of people in healing. And it's great because you're sitting there, you want only the best, you want for the person what is for Allah, you're praying deeply for them, you have to show up, truly that Allah, I have nothing. You are everything. Without your light, there's no healing. Without your knowledge, there's no knowledge. I'm clueless. And to be constantly in that deep praying, that deep sense of not knowing, but not collapsing into, I don't know anything, but, opening your heart, your soul, your spirit, trusting what you get, giving it, then being in a place of not knowing and deep praying and, just constantly like being in service in that deep way, being in the deep praying, being in the not knowing, trusting and giving what Allah gives you. It's rocket fuel for one's walking. And so I think CD was smart enough to see we had a deep hunger for this knowledge. And it wasn't always easy. Ibrahim Jaffe, who was essentially kind of the teacher of this former energetic way of healing, a medical doctor like myself, when he came to CD, actually his story is another way, how do people come to a guide? Ibrahim had felt that he'd gotten an inner message that he was going to die of heart disease in 6 months. And so he said, wow, if that's true, I better find a master of love. So he went on the guru hunt for a master of love. He was brought to CD, and he went to CD, and I think Ibrahim had been in a Hindu tradition, so he went to bow down at CD's feet. CD said, no, we don't do that in this tradition. And so Ibrahim said, well, CD said, I have a message from Allah for you. And Ibrahim said, what's that? He said, well, Allah wants you to know that you didn't understand his message. His message wasn't that you'll die in 6 months. His message was, if you don't change your ways, you'll die in 6 months. So the fact that this guide had picked up this inner guidance that Ibrahim had gotten a couple months ago, it was enough for him to say, this guy knows and I don't. But point of the story being, the first thing that the guy told him was to close your healing school for 6 months and go rest. And, essentially, you think maybe you're enlightened, but in our way, you're a beginner. So that's a pretty strong strong opening hand from Sidi. It's like Rumi's, Shams throwing Rumi's academic works in the well. So, to Ibrahim's credit, he did that and then came back and step after steps, Sidi taught us the healing work. And so that has blossomed into what's now called the Sufi University in the United States. And there's even some students from Europe who come over, mainly the UK. So that work is sort of evolving, and they're, teaching people basics of Sufi walking, basics of the healing, and some of the advanced healing too.
Sidi, could you say just a bit more with regards to the healing? You mentioned it's energetic healing. Is it similar to Reiki? What sort of happens when you do this, and how did Sidi learn of this healing tradition? I mean, you mentioned his grandfather was a herbalist, but was this part of the Shantali way, or was this something distinct?
I honestly don't know that. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know other things. It may have been something that he brought through from the guidance he was receiving. Like I said, there's a lot of Quranic ayats of healing and classical duas. So in that sense, it's very, very it's classical Islamic, remedies, duas, herbal preparations, essential oils, so on and so forth. I think that because we were a group of energetic spiritual healers, we had a chance to, I don't know how to say this. It's a very subjective thing to look into the inner, and there's definitely strong streams of Islam that says that's not possible. Only the Prophet sees, or nobody can see, in the inner worlds and the hidden. But it's very, very clear that our guide could see into the inner worlds, and I've already given half a dozen stories today. It was very clear that, this is given to people. And I remember when Sidi was teaching me the cupping for Lyme disease, and we had people in our healing tradition, people in, after they've been in Sidi's teachings, would often say to a client, Allah shows me this, and Allah shows me that. And Sidi would be very strong with us to not say that for a whole variety of reasons. So, and then some people would, say, oh, yeah, well, nobody can see in the inner, so nobody should ever say that. So we had some sort of doctrinal disputes in our organization over the years. I remember when he was teaching me where to place cups, there's a Lyme's patient there, and he said, Wadude, put the cup here. And he'd say, Wadude, Allah shows me to put the cup here. And he said that 3 or 4 times. And I said, Sidi, when I'm giving cuppings to people, my feeling, my interpretation, my experience is that Allah is showing me often where to put the cups. Is that true, or am I an illusion? Because I didn't want to be an illusion. He said, of course Allah shows you. So I think he was saying that for any of us, like when Allah shows us anything, it's a jewel, and it's not to be shared. It's not to make claims. Saqib, you should do this because Allah shows me. No, if we have advice for other people, we can be indirect, we can offer it, but, don't make any claims, because then it sounds like lordship. And so how does the healing happen? I think in essence, it's prayer and to Allah. There's a lot of expansion of this work at the Sufi University, where they're looking at, encouraging students to be able to perceive the different lights of the different qualities, so they have a sense of what qualities Allah is sending, and then supporting it very directly. So in that sense, you could say there's an aspect of it that's qualities centric. Another aspect that sort of grew out of the work is that, there's these 28 stations, there's the 7 classical stations. So the healing work is often tied to what station might the person be in, and what is the primary issue or quality that Allah is asking them to transform or to heal. And then, so the healing session is not just, I'm really upset at my brother-in-law today, or I just lost a job, or I'm feeling depressed. It's more, it has a much larger context. And it's like, what is Allah making, and what are the steps to take, so that not only there can be resolution on, you might say, the physical, psychological level, but that one's nafs, their soul, their spirit are walked closer and closer to fulfillment, like literally walking through the stations. So I don't know if anyone else does that. I'm sure there's streams in Islam would say this is innovation, but our guide watched it very carefully. And when he came, like I said, there was already this healing school that was going on, this sort of energetic healing school. And he would be, in his public, these weekends at different centers around the country, and he would just be banging on us senior teachers. I mean, just banging on us and wanting to clean these habits we had, which are sort of clairvoyant or energy medicine or energy healing, and something that's not directly from Allah. That's basically, forever there's only Allah, so you need to learn how to heal only from Allah, and not your images of the divine female or the divine male or the archetypal angel or whatever like that. So he spent years cleaning, and he would bring us over the coals indirectly without naming any names in public. We all knew who he was talking to. So, like I said, he was a strong classical teacher. So we were in Florida one day, and one year, and people would come up to him, in between lectures. People would come up to him, and somebody came up to him, and Sidi said, "You should go to the Sufi University." This was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, or 10 years ago. He said, "You should go to the Sufi University." And apparently his mic was on, so you could hear everything. So he said, "You should go to the Sufi University." And the student said, "Well, Sidi, I've already gone to the university. I got a degree. I got a degree there 3 years ago." He said, booming voice, he said, "You got a degree from the University of the Rubbish. I have cleaned that university now." And I remember it because I was sitting next to Mary Halima Fleming, who was kind of the center leader in Florida, but also she had a day job of doing marketing for the Sufi University. And she was just like, I just imagined she was like horrified with what he just said. And I just said to her, I said, "Mary Halima, look at the bright spot. You can just go back to everybody who's graduated from the university, tell them they got a degree from the University of the Rubbish, and now they need to go back again." Always market to your existing customers first. So I think it's very clearly Allah centered. And, as the farther one walks, how to say this, the farther one walks, the narrower the path gets, the less room there is for illusion and nafs and shaitan, the more bowed and surrendered one must be. So the healing, that, and I'm not sure how or why this is true. I mean, I have ideas, but as I watch students, the further they have walked in, this classical way, this classical Sufi way, which I think is very, very, very common in all the tariqas, it's delivered in different ways. But the more one walks, further one walks, higher one walks, whatever languaging you want to use, we would say through the stations, the level of healing, the light of healing, the purity of healing, it's reflected in their walking. Now, obviously, Allah could send a complete healing through a beginner, And someone who's very advanced might not be able to heal anything. But when I see, dozens, hundreds of people, there's a difference. So this healing is dependent on a law, and it's dependent on one's walking their purification. That is absolutely central. It's true in some ways to some degree in some of those healing modalities you mentioned, so the New Age things, and in a lot of them, it's not really true at all. So it has some additional things. Like I said, it's really tied to the walking. There's a interest in many people and what is being shown on the inner, which is really a law revealing a law's knowledge. So there's relative to this conversation, there's another book that CD published, and this may have Ibn Arabi in it too, but this one's called The Realities of Gnosis. And actually that's another thing. So Realities of Gnosis is about developing Gnostic abilities, and that's really comes in the fifth and sixth classical stations of the walking. So I think it's a book that and Realities of Imagination, I think, support the walking in the fifth and sixth stations of the seven classical stations. The last thing I'd say in answer to your question, and I hope this is of interest to people, this book that I mentioned, He Who Knows Himself Knows His Lord, and so I lost that thread for a moment, I think also goes to your answer, your question about Tariqa training and Sufism, but also healing. So in this classical book, and it's kind of a deep dive into the first three stations of the seven. In the second station of the nafs in that book, it talks about the difference of the path of the righteous versus the path of those brought near. Have you run into that, or have anyone talked about that on your? Yeah. So just to be brief, in case people haven't heard of that, the path of the righteous would be someone who you could say fulfills the first and second stations of the nafs, and the first and second stations of the nafs, meaning of the first two of the seven. And that person is like what we might call in English a good person. Maybe they get angry, and if they get angry, then they do what's necessary to clear the anger and not be an angry person. Maybe they go apologize to the other person. If they make a mistake, they try to correct the mistake, and it's generally like a good person. So we need lots and lots of righteous people. But the classic author here basically was saying that Sufism, and honestly by extension Islam, we shouldn't be making a separation between Sufism and Islam, but Sufism is the path of the ones brought near, or to put it this way, anyone who is attracted to and finds himself in front of a teacher like Sidi Muhammad in the Sufi way, I think should assume that Allah is putting them on what this book calls the path, the ones of the path brought near. What's the difference? The author gives an example of a tree that produces poisonous fruits. And the one who's in the path of the righteous sees the poisonous fruit and cuts it off the branch to get rid of that poison. But next time there's a rain or whatever, the tree branch produces another poison, and then the traveler has to cut that poison off, and then the next poison off, the next poison. And as the author said, there's no rest, because metaphorically, these faults of the nafs keep showing up. The ones brought near their journey is to take these classically called blameworthy qualities, anger, lust, greed, power, all those things, to take it out by the root. So how do you do that in the metaphor? In the metaphor, you pull up the tree, or you cut it off from all water, or so that there's no more poisonous fruits being done. In anger, if say someone comes to me and they have anger, there's all sorts of, there's psychology and different approaches that could help someone express their anger, could help someone, maybe understand why they're angry, maybe walk them to forgiveness or find out what, their trigger is, all praiseworthy. But how do you pull anger out by the root so that there's no more anger in the being? And we're not talking about, you might say, healthy, righteous anger, but we're talking about anger that comes from the nafs, anger that comes from the shaitan, which is 99% of the anger you and I experience. So how do you pull anger out by the root? Well, these authors say, what's the translation? Boasting and conceit at the root of anger. So when I explored this teaching with students, how it would come out, and at least in American English, would be arrogance. How dare they? I don't deserve it. I know, they don't know. So yes, you can, in this work, if someone has anger, we would be asking Allah, where do they hold it in their body? So that anger might be held in the heart, it might be held in the gut or the solar plexus, and then bringing the remembrance, if you will, bringing the remembrance to that part of their body, encouraging the person to open their heart to the name Allah or La ilaha illallah. Those are different zikrs that have different healing qualities, let's say, but helping the person open to receive Allah's light, which may be specific qualities or maybe just Allah's general light, and we may not know what the specific qualities are, but helping to receive and receive and receive and receive and open and open and open until that clears, and then to see what's behind that and what's behind that and what's behind that. So some of it is, our guide would always say, don't stop with the outside pictures, so keep going behind. And you know that from our workshop. We were doing that a lot when we were leading people in terms of clearing shaitan. So ultimately, a lot of times the root of anger, like the anger is a doorway to arrogance. And so cleaning arrogance, boasting, conceit, kind of the same process. What are the voices, pictures, beliefs, identities, experiences from the past? We talked a lot about in the workshop we were at with you, the misconceptions from childhood, things that we've hold as true, which are not true, idols that we bow down to, certain identities. So same thing though, basically the healing is encouraging the people, supporting them in opening to Allah's light and helping to wash the heart or the solar plexus. There are healings that take place in the soul, there are healing issues that are in the secret. So all of these things become fair game, and where Allah guides it. And so it's worlds away from the healing that I was taught, initially. And when Allah sends the light and these things clear, there's nothing you can say other than alhamdulillah. And there are ways in which the healers might encourage the flow of the light themselves. It's not totally passive, but it's Allah's the boss. It's in Allah's hand. And I hope that gives you a little sense of the healing process.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Sidi, last question. I'm just wary of time and I've taken a lot of your time already. Did Sidi ever mention or talk about his own training he received from his teacher, Sheikh Abdurrahman Risa Al-Halab from Syria?
Not to me. I think there might have been one or two people, maybe in our group we talked to, probably his family, sons. But like I said, he didn't talk much about his own.
All right.
He loved to say that he was nothing and he was less than the ant.
SubhanAllah. Sidi, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, and I do hope we can continue this conversation in another dialogue, another podcast, another time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and to be with your listeners. And I hope there was something of real value here that people can take and enrich their lives and find more beauty and health and healing. And those are very beautiful and sacred topics. They're all dear to my heart. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to this dialogue with you. And I
Thank you.
wish your podcast much success.